Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Party SLO Talk. My name is Enrique Jauregui. I'm the SLO coordinator for Fresno City College, and I am pleased to be joined by the California Coordinators Hub, also known as the coaches, who will be assisting us with moderating and discussion. Coaches, could you kindly introduce yourselves?
Yes,
Amanda.
I am Amanda Tainter. I am the faculty coordinator of instructional design and outcomes at Reedley College, which is a community college in the Central Valley of California.
Good morning, everyone. Jarek, Janio, Santana College. I'm the founder of the Friday SLO Talks, and I'm just happy to be joined here by my colleagues. And welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, coaches. Thank you, Jarek. Thank you, Amanda. Before we kick off, I would like to remind everyone to introduce themselves in the chat. If you have any questions or comments for our guests, please feel free to post them in the chat or raise your hand if you would like to speak during the presentation. The coaches are available to assist you in articulating your questions or comments. We also have set up a Padlet where you can post additional questions and answers, and Amanda from Reedley College, she will be setting that up. Thank you, Amanda, for that. For those who may have arrived late, the live webinar will be available just outside the main room. If you encounter any technical difficulties, please do not hesitate to notify us. We will do our best to assist you. So today we have two topics of discussion. Our first topic is the SLOs for deep lasting learning with Gretchen, Ezaki, certified registered nurse and also an instructor of nursing at Fresno City College in the Central Valley. So welcome, Gretchen. And the second topic is to be navigating the implications of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. So with that being said, Amanda, would you like to introduce the Baltimore faculty?
Yep. As Enrique said, our second presenters come all the way from the Community College of Baltimore County, and we have Mary Jo Richards, who is an associate professor of English at the Community College of Baltimore County. She has been in the classroom since 1994, and her areas of interest include contemplative pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching and learning, and online learning. We also have Alexis, or Lex Brown, who is assistant professor of computer science and information technology, also at Community College of Baltimore County. And James Braman is an associate professor in the Computer Science and Information Technology Department at the Community College of Baltimore County as well. He's an earned Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degree in Computer Science and a DSc. I didn't even ask what that is, so you're going to have to tell us, James. In Information Technology from Towson University. He serves as an associate editor for the International Journal of Distributed Artificial Intelligence and the International Journal of Software Science and Computational Intelligence. His research interests include technology, virtual and augmented reality, effective computing, and agent-based technologies. We said they will be our second set of presenters. And just as a side note, I had the opportunity to hear their presentation a couple of weeks ago in Baltimore, and it was fantastic. So I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did.
Thank
All
you.
right, Gretchen,
Thank
I think you are up. Or go ahead, Enrique.
Thank you very much for agreeing to share your expertise with us today, presenters. So thank you very much. Gretchen, would you like to say more about yourself, or do you want to just go ahead and start it?
I'll just go ahead and start if I can. Well, thank you, Enrique and Jarek, for inviting me. I teach at Fresno City College in Central California. I'm a nursing instructor. I'm finishing my 15th year, which is amazing to me because I think this is the longest I've stayed at any job. And I've been on the outcomes committee. I was trying to figure it out. I believe 7 years. It may even be 8. And in that time, I just signed up because I was supposed to be on a committee, but I've really learned a lot and come to believe in the whole SLO process. And I think SLOs not just let us assess our classes, but they really guide us to do that deep lasting learning, which is what most of us want. So that's what the topic I wanted to share today. So let me share here. And is that showing my
Yes,
just
Oh.
the PowerPoint, or are you seeing all my everything?
everything.
Everything, okay. How about that? Did that get
Yes.
it to just the main screen? Okay, good. So as Enrique said, I'm Gretchen Ezaki, and this is SLOs for Deep Lasting Learning. So I wanted to start by saying, I have some assumptions about you. You're here and you're instructors. So I'm gonna assume that you love what you teach. You studied and you got advanced degrees in your topic because you love it. And I think you also want your students to love it. That's why you're teaching it. So I believe that your goal is for your students to love the discipline that you love. And again, you're here today. You're trying to become a better instructor all the time. So I believe you really want that you want to be a great teacher, which means you do not want to be the boring teacher and have your students bored through your courses. And I also am making the assumption that you don't just want your students to memorize the things you tell them, take a test and forget it the next day, that you want them to see how it applies to their life, how they can use the information. You want them to retain it. And you want them to see how it applies in their lives. I have a son who teaches algebra, and he tells his students, whenever somebody says, I'm never going to use algebra, his response is, if you're not using algebra on a daily basis, I question your life choices. Because anytime you have to solve for an unknown, you're using algebra. When you tell somebody how long it's going to take for you to get to their house, or when you choose what you're going to pick at the grocery store, you're using algebra because you're solving for unknowns. So I think that's our goal, right? Is that students see that what we teach really has value in their lives. So now let me give you the bad news on that. Because you love your topic so much, you don't get bored talking about it, even when everyone else does. Right? I said I've been teaching 15 years now, and yes, I have led classes like this where I don't understand why they're all asleep because I'm really excited about what I'm sharing, and no one else is. So how do we get others to love our topic? How do we get them excited about our discipline? And I want you to think about when you were in college, or maybe high school or grad school, but somewhere, a class that you had to take that was totally outside of what you were excited to study, and yet you found that you fell in love with that class. What was different about that class from every other class you took? You know, those things that were just requirements and you had to get through them, but there was that one that you still remember. Why? For me, that was a children's literature class. Now, I'm a nurse. I went into nursing because I liked science the best in high school. So I got to college and took science, but didn't know what to do with it. And everybody else in the science classes was pre-nursing. And I thought, hey, that's got a job at the end. That's how I ended up in nursing. Yet one of my favorite college classes was a children's literature class. And quite honestly, I took it because I thought, children's literature, short books. I had to take a literature class, and short books sounded better than long books. And I looked at the reading list, and there was The Hobbit, and there were some books from Narnia, and there was Robert Louis Stevenson. I thought, I read all those books as a kid. This will be easy. I know this stuff. So it wasn't like I took this children's literature class thinking I was going to love children's literature. I was looking for an easy way to finish that requirement. So as you're thinking about a class outside of your field that you really loved, what made you love it? What do you remember about it? And again, I'm going to put up here what my assumptions are. I think for some of you, there was something emotional that was moving. We know from studies that when emotions are involved, we remember things better. So I'm thinking there was some sort of story or application of the content that made you really remember that class, and it turned into one of your favorite classes outside of your discipline. For some of you, it was competition. Just a couple weeks ago, I had a nursing student who's graduating. So our program's 4 semesters long. So he's finishing the 4th semester, and I was saying, congratulations. And he said, it's been good, but nothing was as good as that escape room in 2nd semester. So the very beginning of 2nd semester, I do this escape room with students where they have to solve clues to get the supplies they need to do patient care on one of our high fidelity mannequins. And it's timed, and there's that bit of competition, and whichever team wins, I put up a poster with their time. So this student who's about to graduate is remembering that escape room because he loved the competition of it. I'm thinking for some of you, as you remember that class that you loved, it's because you felt safe in there. And I intentionally put safe right next to competition because that's a hard balance. I do use a lot of competition in my classes, but because some students love it, but you've got to make sure it feels safe. So when I do competition, I always let them pick their own groups. I may post who won, but I don't post who lost. And I make sure those people who aren't motivated by competition feel like it's safe. This is not, winning is not the goal, it's learning. We just happen to have some competition as part of the learning strategies for the day. And then for some students, it's fun, right? If we have a generation that grew up gaming, you need to add some gaming into your classes because there's some students, that's what keeps them engaged. I do a Kahoot fairly often, and there'll be a question on the Kahoot, and then I do a 2-minute mini lecture, and then the next question and another 2-minute. So I get my whole lecture in 2 minutes at a time in a Kahoot. And again, that adds in that competition because at the end, there's the music and the top 3 pop up there. And I always have a bag of prizes that are things that I collect at a conference, and I let them come and pick a prize. But I try and put some sort of game or activity into each classroom or in each class session, whether that's bingo or Jeopardy or Kahoot or I like polleverywhere.com. I know there's some newer programs out there that do the quizzing where you see things changing on the board as people are answering, but something that's a little entertaining and has that gaming feel for those students who love to game. For some of you, when you think about that favorite class, it was the personal connection you made with the instructor. Some students, that's what they care about. They're not, they'll play the games, but they want to know that you care about them and you want them to learn. And to be honest, that's what I remember from that children's literature class. I went in to talk to the professor about, we had to write a comparative paper, and I went in and talked to her that I wanted to compare animals from the world of Narnia, where they talk to people, with Wind in the Willows, where they have their own world and don't talk. And she got so excited about my paper. I mean, this was a very long time ago, and I still remember being in her office and how excited she was about a non-literature person wanting to write a paper on animals in different, children's books. That's what I remember. And that's going to be for some of your students. That's what they care about, is knowing that you know their name, you care about their success. So I'd say, as you think about your classes, right, we all were motivated by a different thing when we thought about our favorite class outside of our discipline. So we need to incorporate all of that in there for our students. because they are going to all be different. So this is SLO talks though, right? So how does this tie into SLOs? Well, SLOs really are the goal we're setting for our course, right? And for students, they let the students know what to focus on in the course. That's one of the problems with being new at anything is you don't know what's important. You see everything and you can't focus. You can't pick out the important pieces. But when we write SLOs, the students say, okay, that's what this course is really going to focus on for me. Oh, my things didn't come up in the right order. So the top one should have been, our SLOs tell the students what skills and competencies they're going to acquire in this class. They need to know that. They need to be able to have a clear understanding of what this class is about. The other good thing about SLOs, and this is what I've really learned from being on the committee, is it helps the instructors to objectively assess the class. We can write an exam that's super easy and everybody gets an A. Yay, aren't we the best teacher? And the answer is no, it was just not a very good exam. Or we can write a really hard exam that really didn't fit. It was something where we're asking students to apply material that we never discussed that way in class. So the SLOs keep us on the right track for doing the right assessments to be able to really evaluate. Did we teach the material? Did we teach it in the right way? Did we use the right assessments to see if the students got the material we wanted them to? So SLOs, as we're writing them, they need to be focused on concepts, not just on content. They need to be those most important concepts of your course. I assume if you teach history, you want people to be able to see corollaries between whatever history it is you're teaching and the modern day, or to be able to use that to understand how it's impacted our current culture. Right? You don't want them just memorize names and dates. I hated history because I was told to memorize names and dates. Nobody showed me how it could apply. So we want concepts, not just content. So focus your SLOs on the concepts. And that SLOs should also push the students to critical thinking. Again, we don't want them just memorizing whatever. For me, in nursing, it would be memorizing disorders and the signs and symptoms that go with them. I want them to be able to add that human part. How do I deal with a person who has this? Right. So critical thinking. And, you know, our objectives may say they're going to learn the names and dates, which is kind of boring. Our SLOs shouldn't be boring. Our SLOs should be more global. They should be the concepts, and they should make the students kind of excited that I'm going to go away knowing how whatever era of history changed the current era, or how algebra will affect my everyday actions. So the SLOs should motivate the students to be excited about your class. We probably all have those sayings that we use with our students, right, to help motivate them. Things like, when you're not clear on your goals, it's impossible to achieve them. For instructors, this should say, when you're not clear on your SLOs, it's impossible to achieve them. So our SLOs need to be clear, both for us as we're assessing them and deciding, did we teach what we should? Did we teach it the best way to teach it? Did we assess it the right way? As we're making those analysis, but also for the students, what really is the most important things in this class? And then another one of those motivational sayings you may use with your students. Why don't people achieve their goals? Because of a lack of purpose about the goal. So SLOs, students need to see how that does tie into their life. How will algebra help me to make better decisions every day in my life? How will knowing 20th century history helped me to live in the 21st century. So this comes from On Course. It's oncourseworkshop.com that I pulled offline, but they did studies and said, this is how we make learning lasting, how we make sure students have that deep lasting learning rather than memorize it for a test and forget it the next day. The first one is that students need to perceive the relevance of what you're teaching. We may think it's relevant, but we need to make sure students see how it can apply in their everyday life. And again, I'd say that comes from the concepts instead of just memorizing content. How does it apply? And then the second one they say is clearly stated instructional objectives, practice, and feedback. They didn't include SLOs in there, but they should be, right? The SLOs need to be clearly stated. The students need to understand what this course is about, what skills, knowledge, competency they're going to walk away with, that they're going to be able to, number one, apply into their everyday life. That's how we get them excited about learning our discipline. Number three, tests need to be appropriate, right? Some things need to be an essay test because you're asking students for their personal feelings, their personal application of it. I teach in nursing. We're teaching them to take the nursing boards, which is a multi-choice exam at the end. Lots of critical thinking in it, but it's all multiple choice questions. So that's what I need to test so that they're prepared for these critical thinking level multiple choice questions on the nursing boards. Reasonable workload. I've had disagreements with other faculty about this. Too little work, obviously students don't learn. Too much work turns it into busy work. And studies do show that there is a reasonable amount of work where students learn from it. When you give them too much, they're just answering it to try and get through it, and they're not trying to remember it or learn from it. And students who don't do well, what do? We give them more work. It really should be better work, not just more work. And, you know, that's hard. That's something we're always tweaking and figuring out what's the right amount of work to get them to learn it without them just getting tired of doing work and turning it into busy work that they're doing without thinking about. And then the first thing that On Course found is letting students have some choice. That essay I had to write back in college, I got to pick what I wanted to write on. And so I picked a couple of my favorite books from our reading list and wrote on that. In nursing, we've gone to letting students pick the patients they're going to write their care plans on, rather than when I started, we made them write on every single patient. Now we've said, no, pick 3 that you want to dig into deeper and learn about. So giving students a little bit of choice. Obviously, they have to do the assignments we're giving, but letting them have some choice in there gets them more invested, and their learning becomes that deeper, lasting learning instead of just doing it and being done and forgetting all about it. I honestly can't tell you any other essay I ever wrote in college, but I do remember the one that I got to pick from a class way outside of my field of study. So as you write your SLOs and as you assess your SLOs, the things you really need to consider is, are they clear? Are students going to understand the SLO? They're not going to read every detail in your syllabus. They're probably not going to read all your course objectives, but SLOs are just a few things in there. And if they can be clear and exciting and motivate the students, you're going to get the students much more engaged in your course. And then, are those SLOs the most important concepts? And I think that's something I've learned from being on the committee. Mine started looking just like an objective. You will describe this thing. No, you'll understand how to care for patients when they have multiple complex issues going on, right? So it should be bigger. It should be the concepts, not just the details. But yet it needs to be clear. And next, are your assessments that you're doing, are they valid? Are you really testing what you should be testing? And are they reliable? Are students always going to have the students who do well on it always going to do well? The students who didn't get it aren't going to be able to fudge their way through it. And are they the right assessments for what you're teaching? And then lastly, will students see how this can be applied in their lives? That's what's going to make them keep the content and really develop a love for your discipline, is if they see that it matters in their life, that this is something they can use on a daily basis. Yeah. My slide doesn't want to switch. There we go. So that was my presentation. Thank you for inviting me, Enrique, and the rest of the committee. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. You know, you say something that caught my eye. Get students invested in their learning, right? Wow. It's in, you know, you serve as a member for the Alexis Assessment Committee, and we always talk about focusing on the skills and competencies of students, because that's, at the end of the day, it's focusing on student learning, right?
Right.
And so that is, you know, with your statement is, you know, greatly appreciated by that. And so how do you, so question, how do you feel about, you know, our college, but other colleges focusing on other things instead of, you know, student learning being the center of attention?
I think I can get myself in trouble for answering that.
Well, not
I
talking
don't
about
understand.
our college, but in overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a college. Our goal is student learning, helping students become the best they can be, helping them get to their goals academically. And that's, you know, there are other pieces that go into that to support students getting there. But I don't understand why a college would have anything other than student learning and student success as its primary focus.
Thank you,
Like I
Gretchen.
said, I think I may have just gotten myself in trouble. I hope there's no one on here.
No, you're right on the money. No, it's great. Amanda or Jarek, any questions?
Oh, Gretchen, fantastic. This is just, you know, you echoed the, you know, what John Dewey has been saying, and other people, you know, the thinkers, the people who gave us the theories before human, for better understanding of how humans learn.
Yeah.
Just amazing. You're touching on all of these aspects in your practice. It's fantastic work. If I may, since we are always so pragmatic about our conversations, would you mind sharing just a few words about how you actually do the grading? How do you make this alignment between SLO assessment and grades? Because, you know, we tend to kind of like, you know, assign homework, quizzes, and then that's what constitutes the grade. But if you consider student learning in the equation, what do you do? What's your secret?
Well, I'm not sure it's a secret, but honestly, some of the student learning outcomes aren't graded items. And I think we see that in the SLO committee at Fresno City as people use their final, or they use this thing. Sometimes, and we have to give grades, we have to have some graded items, but sometimes maybe it's a role play presentation that you have students put together and demonstrate for the other students, maybe the thing that meets the SLO for the course. So I don't think SLOs themselves need to be graded assignments. Obviously there are for the course grade, but not necessarily for the SLO itself. Did that answer that? I'm not sure.
No, this is fine. Again, your focus is on what it is that students learn rather than how well they fulfill the course requirements that's outlined, in syllabus, right? It's Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock, there's going to be a quiz and you're late, you get 10% off your grade. It has nothing to do with learning. It's just, so perfect.
I teach a lot of simulation in the nursing program. One of my certifications is I'm a certified healthcare simulation educator. So I do a lot with the mannequins. And when I have a student give a wrong med or do something, the learning and simulation, they say, happens in debrief. After they've done care on the mannequin, then you talk through what went right, what went wrong, what did they learn from doing it. And I've had students make errors and I tell them, you just had an A+ day because we just saved a patient. It's okay to kill a plastic mannequin because we saved a patient. So sometimes grade and learning just don't connect.
That's right.
Then they have to write up paperwork about their simulation day, and that's graded. But what happens at the bedside, which is really where the learning happened, that's not graded because we learn from our mistakes more than we learn from our successes.
Thank you, Gretchen. Amanda, anything?
Nope, that was great. I always love different perspectives from different fields. It's sometimes we can get siloed into thinking, well, only English can apply this different type of assessment and grading and think of SLOs, or only math or only science. So it's always fantastic to be able to hear from different disciplines, and nursing is included in that as well.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate it. As we move on, we are now in process to have our second topic, which is navigating the implications of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. Baltimore faculty, please take it away.
Sure, thank you so much. I'm going to take a second and share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my full screen PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the invitation for us to speak today on this topic. It's definitely something that's been in the news a lot, all of this new artificial intelligence technology. So I'm James Braman from computer science, and we also have Alexis Brown from computer science and IT, and Mary Jo Richards from English. And we'll kind of go through our parts here, give you some background of what we're working on. So I'll briefly go over some background on AI and generative AI and how some of those things are working. Then Alexis will talk a little bit more about some implications of all of this generative AI technology, followed by Mary Jo on its relationship to education. So yes, so I'm James Braman, and I will talk about the technical piece of this. So with artificial intelligence in general, it's in use in all kinds of different applications now. And a lot of people think about it in different ways, or you have different perceptions of what AI really is. And it can really be thought of basically like an umbrella term to encompass a lot in computer science, dealing with different ways to automate intelligent behavior, making predictions, basically applications to make our lives easier, hopefully. So we have a lot of these new technologies out there, and things have been changing really, really fast recently. We have all these new things popping up, even like voice assistants that you may have in your home, little vacuum cleaners and all this stuff with ChatGPT. But AI really isn't new. A lot of things have been changing recently, but it's really been around since the 50s, even if you think or look at some of the older AI models, really from the 50s and 60s. It's just been changing rapidly recently. So I've listed a few, just really a few general areas within AI. There are many, many areas, and a lot of these overlap with each other. Specifically with robotics, that's maybe an area you might think of automatically when you hear the term AI. And again, that could be something you have in your house, some kind of Roomba or some kind of an assistant, or even how it's used maybe in the grocery stores if you've seen them, or some kind of a medical setting. So there's definitely a lot improving in that area as well. You just might not hear about it as much. Then with natural language processing, or NLP, that's where some of these language models that you're hearing about are really coming out of that research area. So those would be applications related to a system understanding how we are speaking to it, or even writing, or sending some kind of text information. But that area also relates to how these systems can better communicate with us as humans, making our lives easier in that domain. And then computer vision, that comes up a lot in different applications that you might not think about, but you might have seen, some different news articles related to autonomous vehicles and how they're able to navigate the roads a bit. So those systems usually deal with, detecting shapes, obstacles, or identifying different things. So that's a very interesting area as well. And then one that's very interesting to me personally is effective computing, where you have these different software applications that are aimed at identifying human emotion. So you have a system that can maybe look at a picture of you, or looking at you live at some camera feed, and trying to figure out your current emotional state. And you can combine that with all kinds of different things. So maybe your autonomous car can detect that you're angry while you're driving and sort of limit what you're doing. So some interesting applications. Machine learning, you'll hear a lot about, especially how it's being used in other areas, even like data science. But you're basically dealing with algorithms that are there trying to make predictions based on a lot of data that we're feeding into these systems. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then sort of our main topic is with relation to generative AI, where we have these systems that are aimed at creating new content in different areas, things that it wasn't even originally programmed to do. So again, thinking about AI in general, we have this umbrella term that encompasses all these different technologies that are related but overlapping, aimed at making our lives easier with automation of intelligent behavior. And then this idea of machine learning, where in this case, we have a lot of different applications here. So you might hear terms like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. So you have different algorithms that might be based on just giving it lots of information, and it will form its knowledge base based on what we're telling it and some kind of specific outcome. Or some algorithms, we give it some type of a model and it discovers patterns for us, which is very helpful. And there's also reward-based systems, so it kind of learns, what's correct or what's not correct, and it can learn what better choices are. Okay. Then we have this area of deep learning, which we have a lot of very interesting applications here. This is where we get into neural networks and different applications that are trying to mimic how a human brain might work and how that might learn. And that's some very interesting applications coming out of that area, specifically related to generative AI. So those systems are very complicated, but at the core of those systems, a lot of times are neural networks, sort of driving the creation of this new content. So what is generative AI? It's basically any type of machine learning algorithm that's designed to create new stuff. So if you think about a human and its ability to create and be creative, that's what these systems are aimed to do. So it could be text, it could be music, video now, all kinds of things, lots of images. And on the right side of the PowerPoint, it's sort of a strange image, but that's actually an artwork that I have hanging in my house that I purchased from a company that deals with AI and generative art. I put the website there. So there's very interesting things that may look like it's human created, but it's totally created by the machine. And again, a lot of times this was not specifically programmed to do a very particular image. It sort of evolved something on its own. So we're hearing a lot about these GPT, these language models. We'll talk a little bit, but that's just one of many generative AI algorithms that are out there. And the main thing to remember that these algorithms are really relying on massive amount of data, and then it's forming different opinions or looking at patterns and whatnot from that information. So I have a quiz for everybody and kind of make a mental note of what you think the answer may be. So I have several faces listed here and they're numbered 1 through 10. So just in your mind, or just remember which one that you may think is a fake person in this list. Which one might be created by a generative AI. So I'll give you a moment to take a look at that and just keep that in the back of your mind, and we will talk about the answer in just a little bit. Another moment there. Okay. So specifically with generative AI tools, there's a few listed on the left. It seems like every few days, this list is just so many, I've stopped trying to keep track of some of these new ones that exist. So a few ones that are here would be like Music LM, which is a Google product that can create music based on some input. So it's, very, very creative system and does some pretty good work there. And of course, ChatGPT, we'll talk more about that. Google's Bard Tome is pretty interesting. That actually will generate PowerPoint presentations on the fly for you based on some prompt. And you may have seen different models too that can create different types of art. Just tell it what to create for you and it will design any type of image, no matter how crazy it is, automatically for you. And there's many, many more there. ChatGPT specifically, and actually not just ChatGPT, but a lot of these text-based systems have a lot of features. They can help you summarize text, and I've used that a little bit. You can give specifically like ChatGPT, half a page or a page of text, and it will summarize it for you. It can help you with research, generating new content. I know my students have used it for, answering small programming problems that they're working on or trying to solve something that they can't, they're just stuck, and they might ask it to help find a problem in their code, which I thought was pretty creative. There's all kinds of other features too that you can use for training purposes and things like that. So it's very versatile. So what really is ChatGPT? And I put sort of the pieces of its name listed on the page here. But GPT is really for this generative pre-trained transformer. The original model was really designed in 2017, 2018, but OpenAI has a web-based chatbot, this ChatGPT, using this model of GPT that you can ask it various questions and it will give you some result very quickly. So it is designed to be a chat bot. So you can ask it questions, have like almost a conversation with it, or ask it questions based on a result that it just gave to you, which is pretty powerful. The G, or the generative piece there, is related to the fact that it falls into this generative AI. The pre-trained, or the P in its name, relates to just the massive amount of information that it was given to create this model. And then the T is dealing with the transformer model that it's using. So it's really good at statistically predicting words that will come after other words in a particular sentence based on the prompt that you've given it. And it also does a really good job at trying to figure out context of what you're asking it, which can help in the results. Without getting too technical, a lot of these models at the very core are based on neural networks. And the idea of neural networks is thinking about how the human brain may work, how it processes information. We have many, many neurons that are connected together in many, many different pathways, allowing us to process information. So on the lower right, sort of a simulated version of this in software, where that little circle is, would be some type of a node that would process some, little piece of information, some kind of mathematical formula, function based on some kind of incoming data. It would process it in some way, give us a result, and that result would be passed on to other connected sort of neurons, so to speak. And that process just continues until you get a final result. So just as a quick, simple example, and it's a super simplified because these neural networks are massive, we would string together these nodes in many different ways, and we could train it to do things. So for instance, if you were developing a system that was designed to identify some type of an animal, some type of bird in this case, we could train it by giving it thousands and thousands of pictures of birds. And each pixel, each little dot that would represent the components of this picture could be connected to an input layer in this neural network. And given enough images of a bird, it could correctly identify that. Even if you were to give it a picture of a bird that it had never seen before, it would know how to correctly identify that. And that's sort of how these systems would work, not just with pictures, but with text and all kinds of other things. They do work well with different types of input. So with ChatGPT, there's information on their OpenAI website about the overall system, but it's really a lot dealing with neural networks, these generative AI systems. So if you were using the free version of what's available on the web, you can access version 3 or 3.5. And if you have the paid version, they're using version 4, which has some additional features. So there's always going to be this continuous improvement of these features. So wait a few more months, there might be something else new available to look at. But the original, I guess, data set took about a year just to train it, based on about 570 gigabytes of text. GPT-4, I think, has additional information. And it took many months on top of that to be fine-tuned to its current edition. So, the core neural networks of these systems might not change, but the model will always be improving and adjusting as more people are using it. And lastly, in this section, if you're interested in digging in deeper into some of these content specific things, there's some books out there on GPT. Here's the one that I have that's, gives you like a pretty overview of it and how to do some interesting things. If you're interested more on neural networks, I'd recommend that book. And then there's also some content there on generative AI systems. And I will turn this over to Alexis.
Thank you, James, and good morning and afternoon to everybody. It's almost 2 o'clock here in Baltimore. So before I even get started, I'm sure you guys have seen news articles about ChatGPT and this generative AI and all this stuff in the news. So if you want to, in the chat, go ahead and give me a sense of what you think some of the considerations and implications of AI are. Like, I'm sure you've seen some of the news. If you want to type some into the chat, I'll give you a moment to do that before we get to my slide, and I'll tell you the things that I'm going to talk about today.
I also like to take the moment that we also have the palette.
Oh yeah.
If you want it, awesome. Thank you.
Privacy, energy use, the lack of critical thinking skills, students no longer learning, privacy, plagiarism, panic about AI taking jobs. Yeah, absolutely. So James, if you could advance. Hacking it to get information that can harm others, absolutely. Misinformation. So I've got some of these on my slides today. I really want to look at just a few topics because there are many. and we just don't have time to get into all of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about plagiarism, the errors, ways it can be used to be deceptive. And, you know, with this model, it has plagiarism issues on both sides, from both the companies who created them and also, you know, us out here using this information that's now been released to the public en masse. And they scraped the entire internet for data. And there's some question of like how much of that was copyrighted. There was an article in the news of a researcher who was researching AI, looking through the data set of some of these large language models and found her own medical data inside the information that was scraped from the internet. So there's those privacy concerns as well that somebody spoke about. And with that, when I'm putting information into these AIs, who owns it then if I'm still adding stuff into it as I use it? And then when it spits out or generates content, does that belong to me now? Is that something that I can put my name on and call it my own? Is that plagiarism? If I wrote a well-crafted prompt, and that's a whole other field of study too, is writing prompts properly for these AIs to get really specific results. I think somebody's already put out books on prompt writing for generative AI. But if I wrote a really good prompt and I put it into generative AI and it spit out something, can I now say that I own that? And then in addition to that, James, go back one more slide, sorry. Also talking about the artists, there are a lot of artists who were concerned that their graphical style and their art is now part of these models because those images went into these. And there was a recent lawsuit with Getty Images, where one of the images that was generated out of AI, you could still see their watermark in the image that the generative AI spit out. Go ahead, James. So who owns that generated content in addition to copyright issues of what they pulled into this model already and have now released to the world? So there's also been a lot of articles about the mistakes that it's made because it is generative. It is just putting together tokens that go together. So if I ask it a particular question, it's going to try to make sense of the question that I asked and then put together logical pieces of information and spit that back out to me. So while it looks intelligent, it's actually just guessing based on what it's learned and how it's learned it and what you asked it, and then putting out something that is plausible based on what you asked it. And here we've got a couple of examples of where it made factual errors in its own conversation. So somebody else was having this conversation with ChatGPT and asked it, how many times did Argentina win the World Cup? And the first response said once. And then they went back and said, well, what about who won in 86? And now it says Argentina won it twice. So there's a problem of how well we trust the information that comes out of there. And I think some of the concerns around student learning and critical thinking is, I think this does involve some critical thinking. If I'm getting something from one of these models, the critical thinking part comes in, okay, now I need to do some research and make sure that the information I got is correct. Maybe that's one way to kind of look at it. Go ahead, James. And it's also not good at, thinking logically, because again, it's just saying, I've given it some information, it's going to spit out plausible text to respond to that prompt. But here is a common riddle that I think most of us can figure out the answer to, but ChatGPT at the time was not able to. They are continually improving the model, but this is just sort of an example of what we can see coming out of ChatGPT. So if you take a look at that prompt for a minute, can you figure out the name of that fourth kid? Whereas ChatGPT said it's not possible to determine. It's often, when I use it, it's often saying, well, I'm an AI model, I can't do that. And it's something that you can get it to do if you change the way that you've worded your prompt. So in this case, it's asking the name of the fourth child of Mike's mother. So we all kind of see that's Mike, right? Go ahead, James. And here, you also see articles about these generative models hallucinating. So in some cases, you can give it a prompt, and because it's ready to answer. He's always like, hi, sure, I can do that, no problem. Whatever you type in, he tends to go, sure. And here it asked it if Plato and Laurence Olivier had a close relationship. And I think all of us know that those two individuals did not live in the same point in time in history, but it was able to hallucinate a beautiful story about these two men corresponding and having all of these letters that they exchanged with each other. Go ahead, James. And here, this is me interacting with ChatGPT. I asked it to write a 4-stanza poem that didn't contain rhyming couplets. And just as quickly as you saw in the short little video, it spit out a poem for me, but it contains nothing but rhyming couplets. So even when you are sort of specific about what you want, I want this many stanzas, I don't want this information. This one, I think I asked 4 stanzas, and it gave me 4, but every single couplet rhymes together. Yeah, see how quickly it just sort of spit it out. And then another issue is really about the deception that we can create and spread out into the world, or other actors can use AI for. This is a quote that said that if social media was sort of this progenitor or fast generator of fake news, if you think about how quickly, and we just saw, AI can spit out information with us, that AI is going to end up being the king of fake news for a while. So there's a lot of issues around how quickly it can generate text that's incorrect but sounds plausible, deep fakes, fake social media profiles, fake messages. We've already seen several news articles about people receiving phone calls that sounded like they were from their children and like scammed people out of money, because now there's a generative AI tool that only needs 3 seconds of audio to start mimicking the voice that spoke it. And that's what they're using to call people with, right? And then it's already got issues around bias, but it can quickly create more biased content. And then always, when we think about fake news and generally what we see on social media, a lot of it is designed to evoke emotional responses from us. And now we can just generate a lot of that content much more quickly and easily, and at this point in time for free, right? And this was, you can kind of go through this really slowly, James. These are just some screenshots of news articles that came out recently. These are from a couple of weeks ago, where somebody put out a song that used Drake's voice and his style to create a new song combined with the artist The Weeknd. And it sounded very much like them, but it wasn't their work. And now they're generating songs based on other people's voice and style. And they quickly got that removed, but of course it's out on the internet now, so it still exists, right? We've got fake photos that are plausible. Go ahead. I think there's a couple more. Yeah, so they're running rampant. We're lagging behind not only in tools to detect generative works, also in policy to regulate what happens when these things are used for nefarious or illegal purposes. We don't have all of those policies and laws. And even for our colleges and universities, we're trying to figure out what are our policies going to be around generative AI. And fake citations is also an issue too, because if I go in there and I say, I need to write a paper on this particular topic, I need this many words, I need it to cover these specific, bullet points, and I also need it to be cited with sources, it will happily spit out that information for you. And it all, again, sounds very, very plausible. But we found where those citations that it creates do not exist in real life. There was a Guardian article about a journalist who wrote on this particular topic extensively throughout his career, and somebody who was doing research on that topic contacted them because they couldn't find an article by this particular journalist. And the journalist is like, oh yeah, let me figure out what happened to that article, because if you can't find it online and I can't find it, it probably means it was taken down for legal reasons. So I need to contact our legal department and figure out what happened to that article. He contacts the legal department. The legal department says, no, that article doesn't exist. And come to find out that this was a citation that ChatGPT had hallucinated And because this particular journalist's name was constantly associated with this topic, it put that journalist's name on it and gave it a title that was in the style of that particular journalist, to the point where the journalist was even confused for a moment about, yeah, I probably wrote that article. I wonder why I can't find it. So the realism with some of those hallucinations is another thing that we kind of have to keep an eye on. So going back to the images that James showed in his part of the presentation about which one of those images were fake, I did see a comment in the chat. You're correct. Every single one of this is generated from AI. It has gotten much better at generating realistic looking images. Some of the original ones that AI was generating, like the art piece that James had, it has this realism to it, but it's also a little bit creepy and weird, and things don't look quite right. And even when it was spitting out images of people, it was very bad at fingers and it's very bad at eyes. And it's gotten much, much better, where you look at those and like, well, maybe one of those is a real picture. Maybe one of them isn't. We're not quite sure. Somebody said the plane of the face and the neck. And it's interesting because if you just look at it briefly, it's like, obviously that's a real picture. That's a real person somewhere in there. So I'm looking at it closely, like which one of them is fake, and all of them happen to be generated. Go ahead. So the other issue is just biased data. Because the data on these large language models was scraped from creations of humans, all of that ended up inside of these tools. So while some of that is obvious, what it's going to continue to do is continue generating biased information. You can go ahead, James, that's fine. And if we look at the demographics of the majority of the content on the internet, it is a little bit one-sided, in the same way that the publishing industry found that 95% of American fiction for 70 years were written by white people. Some of the same is true of what we find on the internet, and especially since a lot of what it was scraped from the internet was some of those written works. And if we look at who's editing Wikipedia, who's most active on generating content on sites like Reddit, there are a lot of blind spots. We're missing out of a lot of voices in this generative art. So if you're missing those pieces and it's generating information, it's just pulling all of that bias along with it. So we're leaving out a lot of communities that need to have a voice and need to have representation. So when we think about, okay, we realize these data sets are biased. How do we fix it? So this is another huge topic within artificial intelligence communities, is how do you really address the bias that are in these tools? Because it's going to end up skewed no matter what you do. So if we think about statistical bias, if I'm creating a generative model or an AI model, do I want it to represent statistical accuracy, or do I want it to actually reflect the way we want the world to be seen? So right now, statistically, the majority of CEOs in the world are white men. Should AI continue just to return a majority of white men? If somebody asks for information on CEOs or asks for images of CEOs, do we adjust that, right? And then also, if we look at procedural fairness, we know that large communities have been left out of the systems that would provide them, credit worthiness, right? So when I'm using AI to determine something like credit worthiness, do I need to adjust it again to make sure that we're including people that are not going to appear traditionally credit worthy, right? So we want to make sure somehow to keep moving these tools around so that they create the world that we actually want to see. And of course, we can get into whole conversations about how do we actually want the world to be seen and who gets to decide that, who has the power to influence that. So there are huge issues that are still hot topics of debate within the intelligence communities. And one of the other problems is this idea of a black box, where I'm going to put information into these tools. It is going to spit out information. And even the people who develop the large language models, develop the neural networks, once they've got those algorithms running and it's producing output, they cannot explain why that tool made a decision to produce information in the way that it did. So there's another growing group of researchers who are really trying to push for making sure that there is explainability in artificial intelligence. It's important that we understand how these tools are working and why it's making those decisions, but because they're based on neural networks that really want computers to think more human-like, we still don't really understand why humans make some of the decisions that they make. So now we're asking this tool that's being created to think like a human, to ask it to explain itself about why it made those decisions. And that's going to be something that's important with artificial intelligence, that we understand what's happening. So it's not hidden inside a box. They created the algorithm. The algorithms inside that box, we're going to put in information, it's going to spit stuff out, and we have no idea why it did what it did. And then an issue also is there's a rapid adoption, and this was released into the public on large scale with ChatGPT back in November. And between November and January, the number of users using GPT shot up to 100 million. And this chart reflects how long it took these other tools to reach 100 million users. So you look at the number of days and you see that that line for ChatGPT is just straight up and down in terms of getting to its first 1 million users and then getting to 100 million users. And we still got all these issues that we are still in conversation about, still trying to understand, and even us as educators trying to figure out how best to use this tool or address its use in our classes, and still working towards getting students towards whatever their particular goals are. So there's been a recent call by tech leaders for a slowdown of development, but at this point, you know, the cat is out of the bag. All of these tools are already being incorporated. We see it in Microsoft Bing, Google Bard. Microsoft is adding it to the taskbar in Windows, so that if you type in a search, it's already using some of that GPT to produce information for you. So in addition to just computer professionals struggling with some of these topics, us as educators are also sort of dragged along into that conversation, willingly or unwillingly, as it is. There's a lot of good that can come from these tools. There's a lot of ways I think that we can use it in terms of helping students learn, but I think there's always going to be that percentage of students who are just going to use it for the shortcut versus actually using it for getting to the learning that we're asking of them. Thank you. So I've just got some links. We'll share the presentation of some of the reading that I looked over for this presentation.
Hi there. I'm Mary Jo Richards, and I, unlike my colleagues James and Alexis, I teach English rather than CSIT. So I'm really more focused. They're really focused on the technology, how it works, and some of the things to consider about the technology and its implications. And I'm really interested in the teaching and learning aspects of this technology, as I think we probably all are here in this presentation. Next. So some of the questions I want to think about, how might students leverage generative AI tools in learning? I think that's at the forefront of many people's minds. How might teachers use generative AI in their work? And what are some of the potential drawbacks of relying on tools like ChatGPT? And what are some of the ethical considerations for users of generative AI tools, particularly using those tools in teaching and learning? So, learners, where can
Mary,
AI?
I don't mean to interrupt you, but Denise had her, oh, it just lowered. So I just wanted to make sure, acknowledge someone had their hand up. So I didn't know if you wanted to
Oh, I did
answer
not
the
see that.
questions now. Denise, did you have a question? I don't see your hand anymore. Okay, sorry, Mary, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow.
No problem. So what about learners? So I think the thing that everybody's concerned about are the possibility that learners are already and will be increasingly using these AI technologies, these generative AI technologies, for cheating, for plagiarism. But we need to consider that there are some really helpful aspects to this technology as well. For one, AIs like ChatGPT, like Bard, like Bing, like some of the others that are coming out every day, can offer differentiated and individualized learning to students. And as we know, when you've got several sections of classes and maybe you have a great many students in each section, it is almost impossible to offer differentiated and individualized learning to students. So with an AI, the student has a tutor or a teaching assistant who can offer them support at all hours of the day, who never gets tired of answering questions, who will explain things differently as many times as necessary in order for the student to learn the concept, and who is patient and available in ways that we can't possibly be available to students at all time. Another aspect here is the notion of universal access. And obviously, I'm not talking about a universal access in terms of the technology itself, right? People still have to have the internet connection. They still have to have the computers in order to do that. And as we know, not all of our students do have that unless they are on campus. Some of them don't have that in their home environments. However, those students who do have access to a computer and to an internet connection have access to this learning support at their fingertips. And that is one of the democratizing aspects of AI. In the past, students who could afford to pay for private tutors and students who could afford to pay for essay mills, or who could afford to pay for someone to sit in a classroom and pretend to be them all semester, had a distinct leg up in the classroom. Now, in essence, everybody's got access to this very powerful tool that can help them either they can over rely on or that they can use as an assistant, but it can be a very powerful learning tool. Another thing they can do is streamline the research process. I demonstrated this for my students earlier in the semester. I had asked them to put together an annotated bibliography on a topic of their choosing, and they had to have 10 sources, and they had to be in MLA format, and they had to, in their annotations, they had to describe, not just summarize the source, but also describe how they found the source, why they chose the source, how the source helped them answer their research questions, etc. And I showed them how to use this tool in order to find sources very quickly. But as Lex pointed out in the earlier part of the presentation, AI does have this tendency to make up citations out of the blue. So I explained to students that while this could help them and do so very rapidly, it was still going to be incumbent upon them to go through and double check all those sources and make sure that they were legit, and also make sure those sources were actually relevant to their topics. In other words, they were still going to have to read the articles, or at very least read the abstracts or the summaries of the articles, in order to make sure that they were relevant to their topic. Rapid data analysis. You can give AI quite a bit of information and ask for it to look for the patterns and ask for it to identify the trends, and it can do that. And it can output data in a variety of ways, not just in a narrative form. It can do tables, and of course there are these other AIs that are being developed to develop presentation formats, and it can present the data in lots of compelling ways. It can also help at the beginning of the writing process as a student is sitting down to try to gather ideas and organize those ideas and develop those ideas. With some prompts, ChatGPT, Bard, and Bing can really help a student who may be stuck with that blank page syndrome that we writing teachers like to talk about, where they're just staring at a screen and have no idea what to do with that blank page. It can help fill up that page easily. However, students will have to learn to be very critical consumers of the output of generative AI if they're going to produce quality work. Revision and editing is another skill of generative AI. Many of you are probably familiar with tools like Grammarly that can be used to help in revision process. And in fact, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about the AI detection. Those revision and editing tools can also be used to beat AI detectors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead, James. All right, so what about us? What about us in our work? Where can generative AI come into play? Well, we can use generative AI to help us develop and plan lessons for students. We can also work with AI to develop teaching materials such as quizzes, tests, handouts, slideshows. I've used AI to help me come up with examples for students. For example, if you're a math teacher and you're constantly having to generate problem sets, that can be very time consuming. If you're trying to teach grammar, coming up with samples of grammatical errors and corrections can be time consuming, and AI can do that rather rapidly. Another area, and I think one that's very controversial, is the notion that AI can be used to help grade and provide feedback on student work. I've experimented with this a little bit myself. I fed AI, ChatGPT, one of my assignment sheets, and then I fed it the rubric for grading that assignment. And then I stripped the identifying information off, and I fed it an example of student work. And I asked it to grade the paper against the rubric, to provide feedback to help the student improve their work, and to also provide a rationale for the grade that it assigned. And what I was very interested to find was that ChatGPT actually graded that paper harder than I would have graded it. I think it gave it a B, and I would have given the paper an A. And I thought about that for a while, and I think it's because the AI takes the language of the rubric very literally, and so it applies that very, very literally to the paper. And sometimes as a teacher of writing, I'm not only grading the student against the rubric, I'm sort of grading them against themselves. I'm looking at their development as writers over the course of the semester. And the AI has no way of knowing that, only I know that. So I may be considering a student's growth and development, and the AI doesn't necessarily do that. But there are tremendous implications in terms of the time savings involved. Other people have talked about teachers using generative AI to write letters of recommendation. And, you know, we're at that time of the year where students are approaching us for letters of recommendation. One little fun thing I did with it, I'm sure at your institutions, you have something akin to our annual professional summary that we have to write every year to sort of justify our existence at the institution. And we have to talk about our growth in terms of our professional development in our college service and our teaching assignment. And one part of our annual professional summary is a self-reflective statement where we have to look back on the year and write in narrative form about our progress. And of course, this is now optional. It used to be mandatory, but it's now optional. I had already submitted my APS for the year, but I decided just for fun to ask ChatGPT to provide me with a self-reflective statement for my APS. And after I saw the output, I kind of wished I'd actually used that self-reflective statement because it was better than the one I had written. And so I am sure that teachers and students alike are going to be prioritizing tasks, and that we're going to be offloading tasks that we consider less significant or more repetitive or more mundane onto generative AI in the future. Next slide. So the drawbacks. These are some of the concerns that folks are having around learning with artificial intelligence. Of course, there is the question of academic integrity and dishonesty. And I don't know about your institutions, but our institutions are only starting to address this. I believe our faculty senate just passed a revised academic integrity statement that has a statement in it now about the use of artificial intelligence. And there is concern, there's this question of who owns the content that is produced by the AI. Well, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, says that the user who prompts the AI owns the output of the AI. So that's their statement about it. And organizations like the Modern Language Association are starting to give people ways to cite AI in a more formalized way. So there are early attempts to address the issues of integrity and dishonesty, but we're not there yet, right? It's going to take some time. There's the question of quality and accuracy of the AI generated content. As Lex said in her part of the presentation, it's just not assured yet. It's getting better, and it's getting better much faster, but we're not there yet. In time, however, and time is getting very compressed around the evolution of this technology. So we may be talking about months rather than years. That quality of the output may improve so much that there will be many fewer errors. There will be much less hallucinating over time, and what we get from AI will be more and more reliable. But right now, everything has to be double checked. And that's one thing that we will have to teach students how to do, because they're going to be using these tools more and more often. As Lex pointed out, Microsoft has made a $10 billion investment in OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. And as part of that pledge, what they're intending to do is integrate the GPT-4 technology into the entire Microsoft Office suite of products. The AI assistant, will be known as Copilot, and it's already being tested with a limited number of users. Supposedly later this summer, we should get a release date. We don't really know yet, but by the end of the year or early next year, we could be looking at GPT-4 technology being fully integrated into the very tools that underpin all the work we do, as well as all the work our students do. And so the way we teach students to use these tools is really going to have to evolve, because banning them from using the technology simply won't be possible when that technology is going to be part and parcel of the tools that are integral to the work that we do in higher education. Privacy concerns, these will have to be addressed because I really had my own ethical problems with feeding the AI one of my student papers. Right now, there is no way for students to opt out of, for example, Turnitin.com, which is a big plagiarism detector. They have a feature where students can opt out of having their work included as part of the database that runs Turnitin.com. Right now, if I input something into the AI, well, the AI now knows it. It now has that. And so students don't have the option to opt out if I decide to feed their work into the AI. Tools will probably emerge that will change that and will allow for that sort of opting out. But right now, that doesn't really exist. And so we have to be very careful what we put into it, making sure that we're not giving access to personal data, et cetera. And this last one is the one that everybody's worried about. What happens to critical thinking, writing, and reading skills when people become highly dependent on generative AI? And that's a question we don't have an answer to yet. I think one thing to consider is that at pretty much every stage of technological evolution in human history, people have been concerned that with every technological development, people were going to get dumber and lazier and less creative and less able to problem solve. They've been concerned about that since the printing press, you know, and then came the typewriter, and then came the calculator, and then came the personal computer, and now comes generative AI. And so am I saying that to say that these concerns are entirely unwarranted? No, I'm not. I'm saying that we can't know what we don't know yet. And I think we will have to keep our eyes open and see how this technology evolves and how it can be leveraged to help us improve student outcomes, not just to not just treat it as a concern that we have that students are going to use it to cheat, but teaching them to use it as a tool that they're going to have to be able to leverage in the workplace, because I can see AI is already being integrated into many jobs that are out there. Next slide. And we talked a little bit about this. Can we ethically use generative AI in the college setting? Well, we're going to have to resolve all of these questions of authorship and ownership, and we're going to have to do that together. Really, our institutions are going to have to sit down and talk about these things, and we're going to have to keep an eye on the technology because it's going to be changing rapidly. One of the challenges about writing policy, particularly around things like academic integrity and academic dishonesty, is that the technology is going to change so quickly that the policy is going to be outdated before the ink dries on the printout, you know. Another thing that we're going to have to work on is making sure that students and faculty have equitable access to technology. Right now, we're starting to see paywalls go up, right? So right now, if you want to use ChatGPT-4, which is the more powerful version of the chatbot, you have to pay $20 a month to have access to that technology. I think in the future, right now, really these companies are just sort of beta testing this stuff. They're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and they're using us as sort of their guinea pigs. But once they get it really sorted out, I think you're going to see more and more paywalls go up, and there being a charge involved with using these technologies. Right now, we can still access much of this for free. Will that go on forever? Doubtful. There's a lot of money to be made, and they're going to figure out how to make it. And we also know that the developers of AI technology are going to have to work harder than ever to guard against fraudulent and misleading content. That's one of the most dangerous aspects of generative AI, is this fraudulent and misleading content. And a lot of the folks who have been involved in the development of AI are coming forth and they are saying, look, we don't have enough people working on alignment. We don't have enough people doing the work that's going to guarantee that that AI doesn't go off the rails and doesn't present people with a lot of bad information or malicious information. And so even the folks working on this acknowledge that not enough is being done, and that enough can't be done quickly enough at the rate that companies are pushing this technology to the forefront. Next slide. And here's the questions for reflection part of the discussion. I had Amanda throw these up on the Padlet, so they've been there, but we'd certainly like to hear from all of you and what you think about this technology, and whether or not you see yourself using it, how you see your students using it, whether or not this is cheating, and how we can teach learners to use this technology in a positive, productive way. And how the proliferation of this technology is going to change the lay of the land in terms of not just teaching and learning, but workplace development skills. So, James, if you'll forward to the next slide. I have, like Alexis, I have a couple of slides with some citations and also links to, and James, in the next slide, one of the challenging things about this topic is that so much is coming out so quickly. Every day there's 100 new articles about AI, and it's probably slamming a lot of your social media feeds, like it's slamming my social media feed. And so I found a few faculty and librarian curated reading lists that you can rely on to kind of help you keep up with some of this information, because it's coming fast and furious, as are the changes in the technology. And that's all that I have. We'd love to open it up for discussion if there's time.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. Amanda, do you have anything in the chat, or do you want to talk about?
Oh, there's a lot in the chat, but you guys have done really well monitoring it yourself. So I would say that if anybody has the questions for our presenters, I know there was many comments that we're hoping we'd have time for questions. So if you just want to start raising your hand, and we'll call on you to avoid chaos. While we're waiting, one of the questions that I did scoop from the chat was if there's any information on subscription to AI based on social income, if anybody knew of any resources for that data.
I've not yet heard of any, at least not for ChatGPT. Google Bard, I think, will probably remain free given Google's current model, but I'm not sure what ChatGPT is looking at.
What about access? I think the question might have been around as far as access, if there's any data on access based on social income.
Yeah, and I've not
Okay.
looked into that, so I don't have anything on that. I don't know if James has seen anything.
No, that's a very interesting question. I would be very interested to see that as well. I could see that potentially impacting, which applications out there that they could use more than others. That would be very interesting to look at.
All right, Denise, I see your hand is up.
There we go. Yeah, great discussions. Everyone, thank you. And it's just got my mind going. I teach business ethics, and formulating how I change my course, because generally I have students do a short reflection memo before they come into class based on their readings. But I have found instances, not only plagiarism, but what I suspect might be beyond what these freshmen and sophomores might be able to conceive themselves. So I'm starting to think I do away with outside written homework that is submitted and have them actually come in and do a verbal discussion based on their readings. So I'm already seeing that my pedagogy is going to be changing in this new era, if you will. And I don't know if others have found ways to maybe already kind of solve this issue that might be similar to what I'm projecting.
And we have at our college started a whole working group to look at how do we change the way that we're assessing so that we can really get at students' understanding of our material and content versus them just spitting out things from generative AI. I thought, Mary Jo, you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say that, you were talking about, of all the things for students to sort of decide to use AI on, I find it interesting that some of the incidences that I've caught so far have been on issues of self-reflection. So like I was talking about writing my own self-reflective prompt for APS, but students, I asked them to write about their own experiences, their own thoughts, their own work, and do so in their own language. And I found that some students have chosen to offload that to AI. And again, I think this goes to how students are going to prioritize tasks. And if they don't see tasks as particularly meaningful, or if they don't see tasks as relevant, I think they're going to be much more likely to use AI to complete those tasks. And I think students are going to choose to, and one of the challenges is that, at the community college, we teach mostly or a lot of general education classes. That's mostly what I teach, is our general education classes. So students are in my class, not because they're majoring in my field, but because they must take the class in order to graduate. And so I'm just a box that they need to tick in order to exit the institution, right? And so I could see where students would decide, Well, the meaningful learning for me is going to be happening over here in my advanced classes, in my major classes. It's not really going to be happening for me in my general education classes. So in those classes, I'm going to be more likely to offload that work to AI than I am going to really invest my time and my energy into it, because I don't see the value. And I think we're going to see more and more of that happening. Talking about the alternative means of assessment, one of the challenges around that, people are saying, well, just have them handwrite all of their writing and have them do it in front of you in class. I don't know if any of you have ever recently asked students to handwrite anything, but our students have gotten so far away from regular handwriting of anything of any length that asking them to, like, I've asked students to free write for 10 minutes in class, and oh my gosh, the wailing and gnashing of teeth that comes when you ask them to use a pen and put it on paper and produce something is amazing. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because the muscles in their hands that are used for writing, they have atrophied. They don't work that way anymore. They work this way, right? Because that's what students do to produce their work. And so when we ask them to handwrite, I would suggest that in some cases, this is getting to be an accessibility issue in terms of potential disability services issue if you ask some students to handwrite. Also keep in mind that most of our students print now, and I don't know about you, but when was the last time you tried to print a document for an hour straight? It's painful, it's difficult. And the same goes with verbal feedback from students. For some students, that's going to be an accessibility issue because verbalizing their their learning can be a real challenge for them depending on what their disability issues might be. So it's hard. We're going to have to really think hard about how we assess learning differently in light of this technology.
Thank you so much for your wonderful answers. Amanda, you first, followed by Jarek.
Yeah, Mary stole much of my thunder, but as an outcomes coordinator, I look at this time as such a great opportunity for us to really dive into our pedagogy and think, okay, how can I do this differently? And in many cases, better. And I always try and encourage, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction of I'm just going to throw it all in class and make sure they can't do it all at home, to think through how that might be disadvantaging students who are, say, second language learners. We're in the Central Valley of California, so we have a strong population of second language learners. Neurodivergent. I know for me, I struggle with ADD, and so you could probably tell in my speaking patterns, if I have to put a concise conversation or point together on the fly, you're going to get a whole bunch of word vomit instead of if I can sit down at home and think through it. And so those are just things that I would encourage all faculty and those that are supporting faculty to just have those conversations of thinking through, instead of just automatically flopping to we're just going to do everything in class handwritten. What are some different ways to approach our assessments?
Thank you, Jarek.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I can only summarize what Amanda and others have already said. That's exactly right. We need to, and I wanted to go back to Alexis' comments about the types of assessments that we are supposed to be using, right? Because again, asking students just because we can or we think it's a good idea to write things by hand, well, that's not necessarily the best way to let them reflect on what it is that they've learned, right? I mean, we all have different learning styles and we shine in different unique ways, and I think that's what needs to be recognized rather than just there's just the assessment time, everybody take a standardized test. I think as those discussions about AI progress, we are going to be answering and asking and answering these questions with greater frequency. We talked about the concept of flipped classroom way before COVID, way before AI happened. So this just puts everything really. The discussion about this sage on the stage phrase into a bigger question than ever before. We are not, as faculty, the only sources of knowledge or information in the classroom anymore. And if we still haven't realized that, then we certainly are going to realize it in literally hours and weeks to come, because as many of us have already expressed, the situation is changing so quickly for us. So Alexis, I know you're the next one to speak. I just wanted to again go back to your comments about assessment and how do we deal with this? It's just a matter of asking AI, hey, how do I assess X, Y, and Z, and give me suggestions, and we are home free, right?
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, honestly, we can use these generative tools to get some of those ideas. I've used it to do like a lesson plan on a particular topic. It does pretty well with those kind of topics. And I think when we think about assessment, I think we've got to go back to what Gretchen was talking about, is like, how do we get our students to love our topic? And if they love our topic, then we can really get learning happening. And then those assessments are more meaningful and more valuable to those students, where I think, there's a lot of problems because this is sort of an AI arms race right now, where every company is trying to make money off of this. But at the root of it, we will always have students who are going to take those shortcuts. That is not anything that's new. I think the challenge is always the same, is getting our students to be invested in the stuff that we're teaching to them and showing them how it can apply to their lives. Because like in our field with computer science, I teach a logic class and an introduction to programming. And I've seen a lot of students give me some program code that is very advanced for where they started off back in February. And I'm like, we get into a lot of issues where we're spending a lot of time being investigators instead of instructors. And I think that's going to be a little bit harder, but I think the like with most things, like I think you were talking about, our students bring things into the classroom. The conference where we met Amanda was the culturally teaching and learning conference, where the motto is the answer is in the room. Our students bring a lot of information in, and I think the challenge is always the same. How do we get those students engaged? And there's always going to be students who are not going to be, they're not going to be there for us, right? We can do everything in the handbook, everything that we learn in all of the webinars that we attend, and there's still going to be those students who are not going to come along with us, right? And I think those conversations, I'm having these conversations with my students. I say, look, you can use these tools, but if you actually want to be a programmer, you're going to have to learn this. So if you're already at this point where I'm teaching you the basics of computer logic and you're already using these tools to take shortcuts, we always talk about, you're only hurting yourself, right? And we're going to have students who are going to hear that and students who are not going to hear that. But involving students in these conversations, I think, is going to be one of those things that's going to help, so that we can identify those students who really want to come along with us and understand how to use these things in a productive way, because they are becoming a part of our everyday life the same way all of the previous technology has. Like, we don't even think about using a calculator anymore. And so AI is just another one of these tools that we're going to get dragged along with, or we can walk along with it and try to figure out how to do those things.
Thank you, Alexis. Gretchen.
I'm as worried as everybody else is about, students using this, but I want to say I got to be in a kind of a trial on a discussion board program that uses AI. It asks the students it gives them a curiosity point, and it looks on the internet to see if what they've posted is something that you can just pull off the internet. And if it is, then they get a real low curiosity score. And it says you have to be above a 50 to get full credit and stuff. It basically forced them to do on the discussion board what I'd been trying to get them to do for ages, to go to that application level. But by using AI, giving immediate feedback to the students, and it was designed to look like social media as well. The students really liked it, and I was getting the output from students that I'd been trying to get for ages. So it's not all bad. That's all I wanted to say.
Gretchen, we had a question in the chat of what the tool you're referencing was, if you can share.
It's called Packback. It's Packback discussion questions. And yeah, I got to trial it the last 2 semesters. I'm afraid now my students would have to pay for it, so I'm not sure I'm going to keep using it, but I really, really liked it. I felt like it pushed students to exactly what I was trying to get them to do, and just never quite got them there any other way.
Thank you, Gretchen. I want to go back to Jarek's question. I think, Jarek, you mentioned in the chat that you were using a calculator. as ownership. Can you elaborate on that?
Me? Sure, certainly. So again, I did this in the context of the discussion that taking responsibility for what it is that we get out of AI is our job. We can't just blame the tool that's producing answers that are fake, or it's hallucinating, or it's changing its mind on us, or whatever happens. As a matter of fact, that's what we would do in the classroom. We have had, let's just say, professors or teachers who were telling us things we were just kind of like, not sure about. What did we do? We went home, we thought about it, and we changed our minds about how we think about a given topic. And that has not changed. So whether we interact with a human being or an AI, it's still our brains who are ultimately making the decisions and are taking the responsibility, or should be taking responsibility, for what it is that we do with the information that we receive. So again, if a calculator tells me 7 + 5 is 16, then I have another, and I believe it, I have another thing coming at me, right? So it's something for us to decide. So again, instead of focusing on the tools that may commit errors, we should be focused on what it is that we think and we know. And again, many of us spoke about the importance of critical thinking and making sure that we question reality, or we question what it is that we are seeing. Fake news is a perfect example. That was my point. So thank you very much, Enrique, for the opportunity to elaborate.
Thank you. So that makes my question, Mary Richards. If you ask me as a professor to ask me to write a poem, and I write a poem on that the sky is blue, do I own the blue color? The color blue? Do I own that color? If I say the sky is blue, now the blue belongs to me. Just like, the background of the coaches, how do you know?
The reality is that right now, at least, if you do ask AI to write you a poem, it's going to write you a pretty terrible poem. It's always going to rhyme, and it's always going to be in rhyming couplets. But at any rate, as far as the answer goes about who owns, it is getting better, but it still insists on rhyming all poetry. I don't know why. It can't do free verse to say that's life. But that aside, what copyright law hasn't had time to catch up with this, and probably won't be able to catch up with this very easily. But also, OpenAI itself, as I said, says that the person who inputs the prompt owns the output. So from that, if you sort of accept OpenAI's user guidelines as gospel, then technically no, people are not plagiarizing, because that is original content written in response to a prompt that they inputted. However, how are institutions going to respond to that? That's another story. And I think that we're going to see. I think, Alexis, in some of your work, you've collected some stuff about like how institutions are responding to academic integrity and plagiarism. Some statements, there's being some standard statements that are sort of written that are being given out, so if people want sort of a boilerplate to look at for their institution, they can look at them. And I don't know if that's in your references or not, or if it's something you can share in the chat, but I know, was it Hopkins that did that?
I think it was Hopkins. I'm looking for it right now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I do remember there. Again, one of the problems of this topic is that the information is changing from day to day, and there are articles and videos and news reports being released every single day on some new development or some new question and some new quandary. And I think it is more than a full-time job to just keep up with this. So it can feel as though we're sort of being swept along with the tide, and make us feel a little bit, I guess, hopeless to control or stem that tide or direct its flow. And I think the best thing we can do is to talk with our colleagues like we're doing right now, and to talk within our institutions, and to talk to our students and ask them what they're doing with it, and whether or not they find it useful, or whether or not they want it to direct their learning. We've had the opportunity to, we presented this to a group of honor students, and those honor students, they really didn't like the idea that one day AI might be used to grade or provide feedback on their work. They didn't like that notion at all. And they also didn't like the idea of I think, their lessons being planned that way. Their comments were, that's not why we're here. This, we don't like that idea at all. They thought that it would make teachers lazy, is what they said.
Mary, if I have another question with that follow-up. So why have so many teachers, especially in the English and math field, what are they afraid of? Of the unknown of what's happening, or are they just plagiarism?
Well, I think it really, at least from a teacher, as a teacher of writing, it fundamentally changes the game, right? It really does. We have to reimagine everything, because if the model that we've been working on depends on students' originality and authorship, what now is authorship? And who is the author? And that is a question that's hanging out there. However, what I keep saying to my colleagues is, the fear that we currently have around plagiarism and cheating, I think in a couple of years, we won't be thinking that way at all. Because as I said, very soon this technology will underpin all the tools that we use every day. And so we are going to sort of look back at this moment in time and say, oh, wow, well, we really were freaked out when that first hit, but now it's just everywhere. It's going to be like the air that we breathe. And so it will change things in a very fundamental way. And what those ways will be, I don't have a magic 8-ball. I can't really tell you. It's certainly going to be interesting though.
Thank you. Thank you. Amanda, you have anything?
No, I put it in the chat, but I don't want to incite a riot. But what you had said, Mary, was really interesting on what the honor students have said. And, just to be snarky, if we ban students from using AI, wouldn't it be fair then to ban instructors and faculty from using it as well? Nobody has to answer that, because we only have 8 minutes, and that's a long conversation, I'm sure, but that was just me being snarky.
I put the link to it's University of Delaware. They actually have it split out. So there's some boilerplate that you can use where you want to prohibit it entirely. You want to allow students to use it with permission, use it with acknowledgement, or they can freely use it without acknowledgement. So there's some sections you can open up and see their boilerplates that they've come up with so far. And also how to cite if we're asking students to cite it.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know in my classes, some difficult challenges I'm facing with the programming courses that I teach, but I've tried to adopt or get the students to at least look at other sources, look at videos, look at all kinds of things that are online. So I'm trying to also find ways to, I guess, not encourage them to use AI to further solutions, but at least to help them answer like simple questions and things. So finding ways to, I guess, for them to cite, I guess, where they're getting the information, even if it's an AI, or find creative ways to find solutions. Because I was surprised when a few students were telling me that they were using ChatGPT to help them debug their own code. I had known that it can write computer code fairly well, especially for really simple tasks. But I didn't realize until they were telling me that they were using it to debug, finding errors in their code, which can take a really long time to do. I was glad in a way that they were trying to find solutions on their own, but at the same time, debugging the computer code is sort of part of the learning process. So I'm hoping they're still getting something out of it. So I really need to think about that and find ways to craft some of these assignments. So if they do use AI to do that, they're not losing that ability to debug their own code themselves.
Thank you. Chet Meneses, do you have a question? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hello, good to see everyone. I love these Friday chats. And so very briefly, I just want to share a story with all of you. When I was a student at San Diego State many years ago, this was like 98, the internet was still relatively new, and we had it, but the professor I had was kind of a legend, if you will, in the speech communication department at San Diego State. And he had this really hard-ass policy about not letting us use the internet for our papers because of credibility. We could use academic journal articles, but we couldn't use stuff off, then we called it the World Wide Web or the information superhighway, anything off like a domestic website. And so I spent some time thinking about that. And in office hours, we were working on a paper, and I asked him, I said, and this, I'm trying to draw parity to ChatGPT. I said, by having this policy of not allowing us as students to interrogate internet-based information, it's kind of putting us at a disadvantage professionally, because when we go into the job market, we're going to be using the internet, this thing called the internet. Right? And so I kind of joked, I didn't say this, but at the time I was thinking, this internet thing, I think it's going to be kind of big. And so I guess my point is, what I see pedagogy with like ChatGPT and where the evolution of education is going is we need to embrace it. We need to lean into it. Bells and whistles go off in my head anytime I hear the words banning stuff, because it's like, once the students are done with our associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees, they're going to have to use this technology. They're going to have to navigate algorithms and ChatGPT. And so what can we do to humanize our content? What can we do to champion relationships? How do we take the maxims of our field that have been passed down from generations to generations and make sure that they're still being translated using these new communication channels? Like, what is the essence of our field, and what particular narrative are we going to share with students that will give them tools to succeed in life, problem-solving tools, tools where they can establish relationships with other people that will put them in a position to be their best professional and academic self. So I just wanted to contribute that banning of anything, I'm very, very skeptical of, because these students, they're going to have to embrace this technology at some point. So why not learn to use it to complement what their growth as human beings and as the intellectual growth process. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It seems that we're closing to be running out of time. Anything for the good of the order, Amanda or Jarek or Bethany?
Nope, I just wanted to thank our presenters from coming all the way from Baltimore to this presentation. Go ahead, Lex, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, and I just wanted to add to what Che was saying. I think one of the things that we may end up incorporating is teaching good prompt writing for some of these tools so that we get accurate output, and then, again, critically analyzing the output that it gives us. But prompt writing, I think, is going to be one of those things that we're going to have to teach.
Thank you. Jarek, would you like to stop the recording?
Sure, that's it. Alexis is absolutely right. And this is, again, going back to Gretchen's comments, focus on what it is that you want your students to learn rather than tools that they use to learn it. Excellent discussion, everyone. Really, really grateful for your input. Thank you very much for joining us. Enrica, Amanda, Bethany, and all the presenters. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll stay in touch. Until next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Take care, guys.